Okay, morning everyone. We've got a few people in house with us, so welcome to all. My name is Nadine Rix. I'm going to be accompanying you this morning in a bit of a journey to organizational resilience and how we can create it in our companies. I really appreciate all of you making the time to attend this workshop. I know many of you, like myself, we've got kids and we're trying to balance work with home. And there's seemingly less hours in the day, so I really appreciate the fact that you've made time in your day to come and join us. So just one quick housekeeping issue, if you wouldn't mind. If you can keep your mic on mute, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much. And then if you could kindly use the Q&A session. So there's a Q&A portion you'll see on the team site that you can use. And our lovely moderators and everybody in the background that's helping you to do it this morning will answer your questions where it's particular to a specific issue, and then I will have breaks as we go along where I'll go to the Q&A session to then answer questions from the delegates. So just keep your mic on mute and then please use the Q&A and then we'll get to you during the course of the presentation. So we are here today to talk about organizational resilience, which has become kind of the buzzword in the 2020 Business Dictionary. We're going to look at what it means, how to identify it in organizations, and then how to measure it, and ultimately how we can improve upon it. But before we go into that, I just want to share a few things about me, give you some idea of my experience, and also a bit of background into how I came onto this topic of resilience. So I did my articles. I'm a chartered accountant. I did my articles with PricewaterhouseCoopers in Cape Town in 2000. Exactly 20 years ago, we had our 20-year reunion in Zoom this year, a bit of a different feel. And then after that, I moved from Cape Town to Joburg, where I worked for Omnia Group as an accountant. And then after that, I left South Africa. I think a lot of CAs have this idea of, you know, the world's our oyster and we got to get out there. And then I went to Nigeria, not a very common choice for a lot of people. There I was head of risk management for about 5 years for MTN. And I had, when I started there, a team of about 4 people, and it grew to a team of 18 in the 5 years I was there, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Risk management work in Nigeria is very much forensic investigation, so a lot of bulletproof vests and bulletproof cars and working with the police, but very exciting times. And I do think a definite requirement for living and working there is resilience. You have to be able to roll with the punches. After Nigeria, just before I lost all of what little marbles I had left, I went to Ghana. I started in Ghana in 2009 and I started my own firm called Nyanza Africa. I was there up until 2017 and we did very much what BDO does. So we're a corporate company that does corporate advisory services, so tax, payroll, accounting, and then audit as well. In my time there, I started getting involved in training. So I trained local accountants, I did a bit of fin for non-fin training, and eventually it bloomed into leadership and management skills training. In 2017, I left Ghana to come back to my home in Cape Town. Primarily, my kids was a big driving force behind that. And of course, it's Cape Town. But as I sit here today in the freezing cold, I miss the warm weathers of Ghana. But yeah, so here we are. Those are my 2 kids on the screen. They're currently homeschooling here as well, or home educationing. Not really a choice I think a lot of us made. And it's been tough. I think a lot of people have struggled with the adjustment, but yeah, we make the best of it and we're setting into a routine. And I'm sure many of you at the moment where you are at home is also struggling with, you know, kids and pets and work and all these different things. So that's just a little bit about me. And now I'm going to take you through the BDO resilience model that we've got. We call it Rethink. And as I said, organizational resilience has become kind of the buzzword in the COVID-19 survival playbook. And I kept on wondering, what does that mean? What does a resilient organization look like? when I started researching it, an Amazon search revealed about 7,000 publications on this topic of individual resilience. But if you combine the word with organization, it resulted in less than 100 products, of which you'd be hard pressed to find something that's not COVID related. So in BDO, we then started thinking about this, creating this model of, dealing with this crisis. So the first stage would be the reactionary phase, where it's crisis management and survival mode. And then as things calm down, I think a lot where South Africa is slowly but surely moving towards is this creating a resilience, like a survival playbook with which we go, looking at operations. And then at the end of the day, if we manage to survive through all of this and build our resiliences up, we move towards the realize phase, where we've changed significantly enough to actually start growing our business in this environment. So that's just a bit about the framework. I'm going to talk to you today, particularly about the middle bit, and give you some information around the model that's being developed there. So traditionally, organizations would rely on leadership to show resilience in time of adversity. The internet is flooded with information about becoming agile and adaptive leaders. And in a lot of cases, organizational success and survival is closely correlated to their leadership capability. Now, I do agree that leadership obviously plays a critical role in putting the responsibility for organizational, for making the organization resilient and for seeing people through it and for seeing the business through it. But I do think it does pose a bit of challenges if we're going to put the sole responsibility on our leaders and our managers to do that. So for one, I think it's very difficult to concretely measure individual resilience. It's very much a perceptual and an emotional concept. It deals with things like self-awareness and emotional intelligence and our ability to connect, having a positive mindset, which the auditor in me says, well, how do you measure that, and how do you control that? I do also think that if we place the responsibility solely on our leaders, they're human. I think everybody has let's call it a boundary of enough is enough. So I can handle 2 or 3 things going wrong, but if another thing goes wrong, I'm going to lose it. And I think that's a lot of pressure for our leaders to be under. So then I started thinking, well, what if we create something in organizations, mechanisms, tools, frameworks that would relieve some of these pressure from them and then actually give them the freedom to think in these situations where we need them, to create, and to allow them to communicate from a place of comfort and a place that's not in constant need of their attention to micromanage anything. So that's one of the traditional approaches when we look at kind of businesses being able to bounce back or being resilient in times of crisis. The other model that's very much favored, or the other mechanism, if we can call it that, is the business continuity plans and disaster recovery. In my experience, I've done a few of them, and I'm sure all of you have had interaction with these documents. They're very well intentioned, but oftentimes they're not always tested to the full extent. Because of financial constraints, would simply it's not doable to test the whole thing. Surely nobody could shut down operations and prepare for a pandemic by testing their business continuity and disaster recovery. A lot of times they're not communicated properly throughout the organization. And in many instances, they're very, very long documents that make for very good bedtime reading when you're struggling to fall asleep. So if we take these traditional approaches of managing business through crisis, we can then start saying, well, okay, if these 2 things aren't working, or if it's difficult to measure and difficult to manage, can we create something that is really resilient, risk resilient, to help us through what we're going through at the moment? And I then started saying, well, if we can define organizational resilience, much as personal resilience, in the sense that it's the organization's ability to bounce back after suffering some kind of trauma, loss, disruption, can we look at any of the individual characteristics and then impose that onto an organization? Because there's a lot of information around individual resilience. There's so much documentation and research that's been done on it. So what would happen if we apply these characteristics of an individual onto an organization? What if we take out the ones that are emotional, that are difficult to measure, and we develop a framework that kind of takes a little bit of the stress of showing resilience off our leaders and our managers. It's not dependent on having them within the organization, and it doesn't explicitly deal with any particular leadership style. So, you know, in organizational terms, what it looks like when we compare it to human terms, what do we see? So the traits that for me overwhelmingly came forth in terms of when we look at an individual was things like, you know, having a sense of control and having a survivor mentality. Being able to solve problems creatively. So these are all things for me that, you know, we can look at that and we can measure it. It's not that hard to put a matrix together. So we then started saying, well, okay, if we look at an organization in terms of those things, or if we look at it through those lenses, what would an organization look like, first and foremost? And secondly, I think more importantly, is what is required from organizations to be able to display these characteristics. So that's what I'm going to look at next. Before I go there, let me check in with my lovely producers to see if we have any questions from the audience at this point in time. Londiwe, if you can guide me if there's anything that we can answer at this point in time.
Hi, Nadine. We don't have questions at this stage.
Okay, great. Okay. Whew. All right. So with that, we can then get going into the model that's been developed by BDO. And we firstly look then at a sense of control. So if we look at what would a sense of control look like in an organization, for us, it's something like, you know, decisions are based on real-time, accurate, readily available information. No one's running around scrambling to figure out what's going on. Communication is fairly clear, and staff across the organization, whether you're talking to a receptionist, to an accountant, to a salesperson, to a director, you all get the same unambiguous message and feel in the organization. So people, you have a sense of control when you walk in there, that they know what they're doing and they know what they're about. So that's the first thing when we look at that, you know, in terms of measuring sense of control in an organizational context. The next one is being goal orientated. And I know, you know, whenever you look at any organization, they always say, you know, what's your strategic goals? What's your objectives? I think in these times, it goes a little bit further to say goal orientatedness is not just setting SMART goals. It's actually empowering employees to feel like they can achieve it. And it asks questions like, do I know my workforce capabilities? Do I know their available hours? Do I know their scheduling preferences? I've had moms tell me, you know, I can't work 8 to 5 anymore. I now need to do 6 to 9. I need to take 4 hours off in the afternoon. So as an organization, are we putting goals in place that takes all of these things into consideration so that people actually feel empowered to achieve it and motivated to achieve it? They feel like they can actually do it. We've considered all of the realities. So that's being goal orientatedness in our new framework. Strong social connections. This is something for me that I'm particularly passionate about. In BDO, our why is people helping people achieve their dreams. So those of you that are familiar with the Simon Sinek Golden Circle, start with why. For us, it's very important that people can really connect with us on a social level. It's a kind of connection that requires us to be vulnerable and honest. You know, with not just our staff, but with, you know, the regulators, the legislators. Legislation is changing every day. Our clients, our suppliers. And if we look at strong social connections, I find it very, very difficult in the age that we're in. To give you a personal example, this is my first webinar, and I was extremely nervous in preparation for this. And one of the things that I know is important when you're doing these webinars is to connect with your audience. When you're doing any kind of training or session, you need to be able to connect with your audience. And so one of the things I started looking at is to do polls. So can we do polls during the audience and we get a view of you know, how they feel about things? Can we ask questions to get an idea of, you know, are they at home or are they at work, or, you know, do they have kids? Just to kind of personalize it a bit. And with Microsoft Teams, as most of you would know, that feature is not available for live events. And I got so hung up on it because I was like, how do I form this strong connection with my audience if I can't get in touch with them? I can't see them. I'm talking to a computer. And then I realized we're an audit firm. We weren't meant to do this over a computer. You know, we're not a training company. We're not geared for this. And instead of trying to pretend that we know, you know, all these tech things that are so far out of our realm, let's just own that and say, yeah, we'd love to be able to connect with you. Please talk to us in the Q&A. We'd love to get close to you, but this is unfortunately the reality. And with everything that we're trying to prioritize at the moment, we're upskilling ourselves in this. We're getting to learn how this works with so many other people out there that are thrusted into this world of digitization and connecting and learning what lighting works, you know, on our webinars. So I think for me, strong social connections is really that desire to be close, to have people that follow us because they believe what we believe. They believe in people helping people achieving their dreams, and we can be honest about what we can do and what we can't do. And I think you can very much put a parameter on how to measure that in organizations. The next one to look at is strong problem solving skills. So here we look at things like active scenario planning. Scenario planning is also been a word that's been thrown around quite a lot. And, you know, there's a structure behind it. There's a process behind it to how we can do it. There is a required culture where there's no fear of failure. Creativity can't thrive when somebody is looking over your shoulder the whole time and forcing you to do something quickly. So strong problem solving skills, there's mechanisms that we can use, or, you know, do we see just people coming into a room, throwing ideas in a hat and then pulling one and that's the one that wins and we kind of forge ahead with that one. So strong problem solving skills is definitely something I think you can also see in organizations in terms of how they run their meetings, how they conduct their innovative studies, how they do research, and how they do development. Then the last two ones is asking for help. I think in the environment that we're in, there's a desperate need to open up and say, you know what, I'd love to give you an answer, but I can't. In the financial services sector, in the audit world, you know, the game is changing. You know, going concern all of a sudden becomes a massive issue, and we're all scrambling to find out, you know, how to put a financial metrics on it. How do we measure it? Oil prices is gone crazy. So, you know, how do we work together with our legislators, with our regulators, with the people in the industry to say, well, you know, none of us know. Can we at least be on the same page with that? And then see how we can help each other going forward. So there's an intent of asking questions, seeking advice and offering assistance where we can without pretending to be the experts in areas that we're not. We're all going through this at the same time. And then the last one on my slide, which is one of my favorites, is survivor mentality. It's absolutely devastating what's happening in the world out there. I sit very comfortably in my home office and I'm very fortunate to have the things around me that I have. I can educate my kids online. I can continue to work, but so many people can't. And it's that ability to have a look at what opportunities are there. We look, for example, at the tourism sector. I mean, tourism has been brought to its absolute knees overnight. So do we write off that sector, or do we say, you know what, in tourism, if we look at the clients of the tourism sector, they still have needs. You know, they still want to break away from the office. They still want to experience new things. They still want to see other things. So is there something in the sector that we can do to still meet those needs? Can we maybe change the way we use our assets? Can we repurpose some of them to give our clients these experiences that they're not going to end up not needing just because the sector has been brought to a grinding halt? Alternatively, if we have assets and if we have people, is there a way that we can, you know, utilize them for something different? We've seen in the States where they've taken meat producing factories and they've repurposed them because it was shut down due to COVID, and they've repurposed them to produce ventilation units. So can I take what I have and modify it to serve another purpose, or can I still serve my clients but in a different way? So that speaks to the survivor mentality on this slide. So those would be typically then the characteristics that we'd want to see in an organization that classifies itself as resilience. On this point, before I go to the requirements to have these characteristics, I'm going to quickly go back to our Q&A. I've seen some activity here on the side, but I think Londiwe has dealt with most of the questions coming in. Londiwe, anything for me at this stage?
Hi Nadine, nothing as yet. The question we had was just requesting the recording.
Oh, okay. All right. So the recording is going to be on our website afterwards, if I'm correct?
Correct.
Okay, super. All right. Thank you so much for that. All right. So with that, going to move on to then what is required from organizations to display these resilience characteristics. We went and we evaluated each of these elements and then asked the question, what is necessary for each of the elements to be in an organization? And there was 3 resounding themes that came through, and I'm going to take you through those right now. The first one, surprise, surprise, is data. Everybody has been talking about data, access to data, data privacy, but let's face it, without data, we are lost. If we don't have proper financials, we can't make decisions. If we don't have input to the regulatory changes that are available, we can't do anything. Something like workforce planning. If I don't have data on my workforce in terms of what is their health status, what is their mobility, what is their scheduling, it's very difficult to match that with client needs because my client needs are going to change. Doing a SWOT analysis and a pest analysis, even if I take something like client data. So if I have clients in a particular sector and I know that those clients make up 60% of my revenue, if something happens tonight to that industry and knocks that client, do I know the knock-on effect on my business? Do I have the data at my fingertips to enable me to make decisions in the best interest of the business? And then again, coming to scenario planning, where we look at the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and we actively prepare for that. So do we have in our firms, in our organizations, our fingertips on the data? And data that's free from error. I don't know how many of you have worked in Excel or worked with Excel. It's a lovely tool, but it's also an awful tool because, you know, if the date format in one Excel spreadsheet to the next one is not the same, it takes me forever to try and compare things. Some people would give you a list of clients, and on the one spreadsheet it says BDO Pty Limited, and the other one it just says BDO Inc. So is it now the same company? Is it not? You know, so it makes it very difficult to compare data sets if it's not free from error and if we have some sort of form field validation that makes sure that it's the same across all the areas where we use this data in the organization. So basic things like that needs to be in place. The next thing then that we look at is systems and processes. So having agile systems and processes is absolutely key. It's one thing to have the data, but if I don't have a way in which to analyze it, to flag me in instances where I need to be aware of something, it's very difficult to make decisions. We need to ensure that the organizational why, our purpose, why we exist, is aligned with the way in which we do things, which in turn is aligned to how we do things. So we take something like goal implementation. I've implemented this goal, I'm tracking it, I'm checking all my options to see that it can be implemented properly. Do I have a flag down the line that tells me, you know what, we need to change direction. The way in which we're implementing this is not working anymore. We need to shift into another area. So systems and processes are absolutely critical. And then the last one, and I think this is the one where a lot of organizations will struggle, but I have seen that those who embraced a trust mentality have absolutely thrived in these conditions. So trust speaks to organizational transparency. Do we share our position with our workforce, our suppliers, our clients, our community? If we have clients that we're delivering a service to, do they feel that they can come to us and say, you know what, we've survived up to now. We've survived the first 3-4 months, but we don't know whether we're going to be able to support you in the next 6 months. We'd like to do business with you, but can we work on something together? Our suppliers, you know, they're having supply chain issues. Do they come to us and say, you know, we really want to work on a solution, but we can't, cater for everybody at the moment. So do we have those really honest discussions with the people in our communities and how what we do is affecting them, to look for solutions that really fit everybody? Something like the homeschooling thing. Are we catering for people who can't work an 8-hour day? What solutions are we giving to them? Are we open and honest with them to say, look, we understand your situation, or if you're in that situation, can you go to your boss and say, you know what, I love my job, but I've got kids at home and I'm not skilled as a teacher. I'm going to have to invest some time in figuring this out. Do we have the technology? Can we say, don't ask me to print something at home if I don't have a printer? So are we taking these things into consideration, and are we open and honest and vulnerable with each other? Do we have that safe space where we can talk to people in the organization without fear of being ridiculed? If we don't have the skills, can we say, I'd love to do it. Give me a day or two to upskill myself and I can help you. So again, there's an honest intent of seeking advice and offering assistance, because we're all in this together. So with that in video, what we then came up with is kind of like a resilience wheel, where we look at these 3 parameters. And so we look at trust, we look at systems and processes, and we look at data and all the subsets behind it. So this is our resilience wheel. And if I can go back to the slide I had before, it kind of fits into that middle bit, that little hump you see in the middle of the overall rethink framework of BDO, of which the first part I said is the reactionary stage. This is where we're just surviving and safeguarding. And we've moved now to embedding the resilience in the business to keep it running. Because even if COVID's finished, or they find a vaccine, I do believe in finding a model that's more workable and part of the organization, rather than just a plan that we test every 6 months in case something happens. So the way that we want to apply the resilience framework then in the organization is we've designed and developed some diagnostic tools and some questionnaires across these 5 areas. So we look at strategy and leadership, people and culture, finance and supply chain, business development, which is clients, distribution, service delivery, product delivery, and then we've combined infotech and operations together. That's also where your legal and regulatory requirements would be in. And we've designed questionnaires across each of these 5 areas that cover the 3 parameters of data, systems and processes, and then trust. And once you've done the questionnaire, we'd be able to analyze, where you are in terms of resilience. What are particular pitfalls? Where can we start working to build a resilient organization in a structured manner that we can actually test, we can verify, we can check levels of improvement. And I think in doing so, it gives us definitely a sense of control in terms of where do we start to change the way we do business? How do we take back ownership? In an environment that's constantly changing around us. There's so many external factors that's operating around us and affecting our day-to-day. How do we take back ownership? And how do we start building that resilience in the organization to relieve some of the pressure on 1 or 2 leaders to kind of see us forward? So with that, then, this is probably one of my favorite slides that I've seen in the recent COVID pandemic. I do agree. If I hear the words new normal one more time, I'm going to scream. I do think it's now just living with the virus. I don't think there is a new normal. I think this is just what it is. And I'm sure that once we get through this, there will definitely be things in our future that we have to face, that can cause some sort of disruption. So that's the end of my slides. As I said, you can get information on the BDO website. You can go to BDO Global. We're currently working in very close partnership with them on bringing this model to our clients and really fleshing out the details so we can start getting some parameters in terms of industry, put some benchmarks together. If you need any additional information on this, please feel free to contact me. My email address is on the screen. My number is there as well. If you want to be part of the project or part of the data collection, let us know. We'd be happy to work with you in terms of this and hopefully build some resilience in our countries that we operate in. So with that, I'm going to go back to the lovely ladies in production. I see we've got a few comments here and questions coming through. Sorry, let me just go this side. Okay, so we've got from Anonymous, in a time of uncertainty, people want to feel that someone is in charge and will look after the company. I agree 100%. How do you as a leader be honest in saying, I don't have all the answers, because without causing any panic and doubt? That is an excellent question. I think for me personally, it's at this stage where we're at, it's about being there for each other. If I just take a practical example, we started a BDO parenting support group a while back, and a lot of us are in this group, and there are a lot of leaders in this group from the firm, and we are just open and honest about the challenges that we're going through. We don't have the answers. We share tips and we share ideas and we go test different things, and in 2 weeks' time we come back and we say, well, that didn't work and this did work. And we are very raw and honest with each other. You know, we tell each other, I can't do this anymore. I don't know how I'm going to cope. My boundaries have disappeared. I've got people emailing me 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I email them back, and all of a sudden I'm working at those times. So I think there is a balance between not having the answers, but also getting your hands dirty and showing people that I'm in this with you to find a solution. Let's come up with a few ideas. Let's go and test them. And if they don't work, let's shift into another direction. So I don't think leaders can simply throw their hands up and say, well, I don't know what's going to happen to us. I think it's about really saying, what is the worst case scenario? What do we need to do when that happens? What is the best case scenario? And really empowering people to go and test different solutions and really encourage people to be creative. There's been some fantastic ideas that have come out in organizations, but we've got to be willing to open our minds to fail, to test, and to learn. So for me personally, that's pretty much the approach that we've taken in BDO. I hope that answers your question, Anonymous. Oh, okay, we've got another one here also from Anonymous saying, what can we use to collaborate? We are on Apple Pages, but not all have pages. Okay, I'm not, unfortunately, that tech savvy, but I think collaboration tools, from my experience, play around with it. I've been doing research and testing various apps from when this thing happened. I find Teams works quite well in an organization, but you know, there's so much out there. It depends on what your organization is doing, whether it's in the primary sector, dealing with raw materials, whether you're in secondary sector, where you're dealing with manufacturing, or whether you are providing a service. So I think it's very much dependent on your organization, and then finding something that's fit for the purpose of the organization. I've really just gone out and played and experimented, and I've joined chat groups to find out what people's experiences are with things. So yeah, don't be scared to limit yourself to one thing. I would say that's how I would answer that. Sorry, I've scrolled down the questions here. How do we collaborate on a Word document with others? How do we collaborate on Word documents with others? Ooh. Zed, I'm not entirely sure I've got that one. I'm going to go on and see if we can get some more clarity on that. Veronique, Veronique, one of our BDO friends. I'm from the Global on the People side. Who are you in touch with on this? Okay, yes, I'm in touch with Anne. There is a global site called the Rethink site. And we are currently working on rolling this out to some of the organizations in the other countries as well. So if you go onto the BDO Global site, they've got a Rethink hub. You know, if anybody wants to get involved, please feel free to hook up with us on that side. I think it's great. Pivoting your business is the buzzword. When and how do you decide to pivot? When this needs resources and what time, and when resources are limited? Whew, we've got a really active questioning audience here. It's quite interesting. All right, so if we look at pivoting a business, I think it's very much being able to assess your client needs, having a very clear view of what role you are fulfilling in your client needs. So who is your market? And then if your current business model is unable to meet client needs, there needs to be a shift. in whichever way. So like I mentioned, for example, in tourism, where your clients definitely still have those needs to break away and to get away, but unfortunately with the limitation of movement, restriction of flights, hotels being clamped down, you can't give them what you used to give them. So the need hasn't gone away, but there's a need to fundamentally shift the way in which we do business. If the need has disappeared, I can't now off the top of my head think of an example, but if the need is no longer there, then I think you'd have to look at allocating your resources to fill another need, if that makes sense. Limitation of resources, again, I think it's very much using what we have. So just for example, in the audit sphere, we work on timesheets. So we work on clients, we have timesheets, and every now and again there might be idle time that people have. So it's having that availability or having that visibility rather in seeing which staff isn't currently working on a client, and then saying, okay, I have this creative project, I would like somebody to get involved in it, and then opening up that space to do that. So you really using staff in their off-peak time to enable you to work on that, and also being open to the idea that if I've always been in sales, I can now go and work in another sector. I need to upskill myself a little bit, but really having flexibility in our workforce to utilize the limited resources that we do have. Risk reporting and control self-assessments to the board. That's a very, very, very good question. Currently in the risk realm, if you want to call it that, in the risk sphere, there has been a lot of discussions around changing the frameworks that we have been using up to now. I'm part of the Institute of Risk Management South Africa, some of their committees, and we are revisiting all of the frameworks, the COSO ones, the ISO standards, because all of a sudden we're realizing it does not take these things into consideration. A lot of us have had pandemic on our risk register. It was just very, very low down because nobody really took the likelihood of it happening seriously. So although we did extensive risk assessment, I think in our rating scale where people judgment comes in, we might have been a bit flawed there. So in terms of going forward, I'm hoping that if we get the resilience model up and running, it is something that can play a part in actually measuring risk resilience. So taking the wording of risk mitigation and putting controls in place and replacing that with a risk resilience, looking at the three parameters that I've looked at. Because I do think also not just from a control self-assessment perspective, but I do think our shareholders are going to start looking at how do I value a company? With the financials being up in the air and with going concern and with valuations, all of a sudden asset valuations are vastly different. In any hotel sector, any company that used to own the offices that they operated in, that valuation is turned upside down. So I do think in looking at giving shareholders value and giving shareholders assurance in what they're investing, I think our shareholders are going to start looking for something else. And I think resilience might just be part of the answer that we could be offering them going forward. How do you stay engaged with employees remotely and still have a sense of community and building a team? That's also a very, very good question. I must admit, in the beginning, I did love not having to sit in traffic to go to work. But I am starting to miss my team members. So we've actually in BDO in Cape Town, we've got a social committee that's fairly active. So we've actually started doing weekly challenges. One of the ones we recently ran was a museum challenge where they can take any museum art piece and they have to recreate it at home with whatever they have available in their house. And they send us the pictures and we distribute that. And, we've got small prizes and things that we give out. Friday afternoon coffee sessions are quite, quite well received. So kind of like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, getting a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Now that it's getting a bit colder, maybe a glass of red wine, and really sharing with the team members and make sure that it's non-work related. There is a tendency to go, ooh, did you get that email? Steer far away from that, focus it on, how people are coping, if someone's doing renovations, how that's going, how the kids are doing. So that's one way I think we can definitely stay connected with our teams. And cameras on. I think it's definitely important to keep the cameras on. All right, show the resilience wheel again. Yes, sure, I can go back to that. Okay, so This is kind of the essence of where we wanted to go to. I think the slides, Londiwe, please correct me if I'm wrong. The slides, the recording that will be on the website will have the slides with it as well, if I'm correct.
Yes, correct. So what we usually do is we send all attendees the recording as well as the slides.
Okay, all right. So, right, you guys can get that there. We've got a question here to say, what is the best practice in monitoring performance and delivery on objectives without making employees feel that they are watched? For me, it's a pertinent question, because unfortunately now we can't just sit together, have a cup of coffee and then eventually get to the work. I do think it's important that we do measure performance, but I think it's also important that we have a conversation with our staff, an honest one that says, you know what, I know things are tough, and I know, we're going through a difficult time. I know you have additional responsibilities, but we still need to keep our finger on the performance. We still need to kind of keep track of how you're doing and what you're doing and how you're doing it, and talk to them about how they would like to be monitored. Not everybody wants to be micromanaged. Sometimes people will say, you know what, I'll send you a report on a weekly basis. So figure out, I think it's time to start applying individual tailored management skills here, and not apply a one-size-fits-all, especially in this environment where some people have kids, some don't, some have a spouse that can help out, some don't, some can't go into office, some can. So I do think it's important that we have those conversations with staff independently to say, look, there are certain things in the business that still needs to happen. What would work for you? Let's figure out a way to do it together. Right, sure, that was quite some nice questions coming from our audience. I'm really grateful again for the time that you've all spent on this. Please, as I said, feel free to contact me. Go onto the BDO Global website. There's a lot more information there that people can get. If you're interested in having a diagnostic done, feel free to contact me. We can send you the initial diagnostic questionnaire once we've gotten to know a little bit about you. And yeah, how does one keep staff motivated as the risk of job security increases? Yes, that is a tricky one. I think for me, I'm going to come back to the connection. I think motivation on a deep rooted level, and even if we go back to the basics of Maslow's hierarchy, is a sense of connection. Do your staff feel part of the organization? Do they have strong connections with their colleagues? I know in BDO we've been very frank and open around things like job security, financial performance, and I think it's important that organizations have those conversations with staff instead of everybody wondering what's going on. So being proactive in terms of your communication to say, yes, we know the industry has suffered, or we know some of our competitors are doing this and this. This is our strategy. So if there are going to be job losses, have proactive discussions on an individual basis with people, and also where there's not going to be job losses or people aren't going to, make sure you communicate that. Tell them, we're in a very fortunate position where we are able to pay all our salaries this month, and we're not, we're looking forward to surviving this and thriving through it. So be very honest in your communication. And I think just you showing that you care about people, for me, is very much a motivational factor. It's an intrinsic motivational factor, showing you care, showing you taking their situation into consideration, being open to flexibility. So if somebody might be in a sector that could be struggling, but they see another part of the organization is developing, tell them if you want to go and try your hand at that, let's make that work. So I think it really just opens up the floor to having those open and honest debates, which are not easy. Don't get me wrong, none of these things are easy. They're incredibly difficult. But at the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves, what is the risk of not doing it? What is the risk of not having these conversations? And I think that outweighs any choice we would have in actually having these difficult conversations, because if we don't have them, I'm sure that things will go significantly worse. All right. So I see all of our questions are closed. Thank you very much, everybody. If you want any more information, Nondiwe, I think we can close it out for the day. Refer people to the website for the link to the call. Let me just make sure. Do we send them an email for the recording? Sorry, my first time.
Correct. So I will send to everybody that attended the call an email with the links of the recording as well as the slides.
Okay, awesome. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, again for your time. I hope you could get some ideas from the session for building resilience into your organizations and to really start the conversation around this. I'm really grateful I was given this opportunity. Thanks to my fantastic team of ladies, Nondiwe and Deborah, all the way in Durban, a little bit warmer than us here in Cape Town. So until the next webinar, I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend ahead. Stay safe and stay warm. Thank you very much.